Now, across Texas, the issue is.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
I'm Greg Krugen in Houston.
I'm Rudy Koski at Austin, and this is Texas, the issue is.
President Trump is back in the White House and is promising what he calls a golden age in America. His executive orders have already drawn major criticism, setting up some tense moments in Congress and in the courts.
I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
In the first week of his second term in office, President Trump signed dozens of executive orders. A cornerstone of his campaign was fixing the illegal immigration issue at the southern border. I talked to two freshman members of Congress who were in the rotunda for the inauguration. Representative Brandon Gill from North Texas is the youngest Republican in Congress.
He is taking us out of the darkness that we have been engulfed in.
Representative Julie Johnson, a Democrat, attended the inauguration despite protests by some of her colleagues.
I felt like it was my responsibility to go to the inauguration.
What is your initial reaction to the slew of executive orders the president signed on his first day, specifically the border ones?
You know, what's so disturbing about that is he went after people who were coming here for legal immigration. You know, I am all for crackdown on illegal immigration, just like anyone else. We need to have a secure border. We can't have people swimming the Rio Grande to come to Texas. But these were people who were trying to do it the right way, who had filled out the application, who were waiting their turn, who had their legal appointment. And he just cut them at the knees.
When it comes to birthright citizenship, why do you think the president is right on this?
Most of them are coming, the vast majority, with fraudulent asylum claims. So you have illegal aliens coming over, having babies, using American resources to give birth, and then using that as an anchor to stay in the country. It is a gross abuse of our immigration system, and that's what President Trump is fighting back on. This is an incredibly popular executive order. Americans are sick of being taken advantage of by the rest of the world, and ending birthright citizenship, I think, is a great place for President Trump to start.
Is that not protected by the 14th Amendment?
Historically, the 14th Amendment was about slavery. It had nothing to do with illegal aliens providing fraudulent asylum claims to anchor themselves into this country. I think that that's an anachronistic way of looking at a birthright citizenship. So no, I don't. I think that this is it's going to go to court, but I think that it will ultimately be upheld.
I think Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship is completely unconstitutional. And I think Representative Gill is obviously misguided on that issue, and maybe he should take a legal class or two. You know, I think that the Constitution is very clear that if you're born in this country, you are a citizen of this country. His executive order, in my opinion, should not hold up and is completely unconstitutional.
Is there any key piece of legislation that you hope gets passed in Trump's first 100 days from a Congress standpoint?
Well, last week I introduced the Remain in Mexico Act, and what that does is codifies President Trump's Remain in Mexico executive order into law. And Congress has to do this because we cannot let a future Democrat president come into office and undo all of the executive orders that President Trump has been initiating to protect us from illegal aliens.
Do you think there needs to be some type of bipartisan deal on the border, or is that too big of a task to chew in the first 100 days?
I would love to see a bipartisan bill passed on the border. You know, I got appointed to the Homeland Security Committee and Foreign Affairs, and so these issues are going to be coming through my committee process. I think Texans need to lead on this. I think Texas Democrats need to lead. I would love to see us have a visa overhaul. You know, there's a lot of folks that want to come to this country to work and provide for their families, and there's a lot of businesses that need this workforce.
Man, my word is cinema, maybe popcorn. I got a lot of words, so I'm gonna kick it to you, Greg. What is your word?
Stephen, my word is transformation.
All right, Rudy, what about you?
Stephen, I'm a little bit like you. Initially, I considered combustible, but based on what we just heard in those interviews, my word is turnabout.
All right, the Fox X Trio will be right back. The Fox Texas Trio is back. President Donald Trump is following through on his campaign promises, from pardoning those from the J6 issue years ago to declaring it a national emergency on the border and other topics. Greg, what do you think? I mean, isn't this what the voters voted for?
Stephen, I'd say most of it, but not all of it. Better border security and stopping mass illegal immigration? Absolutely. A rollback of trans-empowering, DEI-driven social engineering? For sure. A new strategy to reverse inflation and kickstart working-class prosperity? 100%. For the millions fighting to make ends meet, spending billions on other people's wars is an increasingly tough pill to swallow. And for a majority of Americans, the massive taxpayer subsidy and rush to renewables just doesn't make much sense. All that said, I think lots of Trump voters, both Republican and independent, are really uncomfortable with the blanket pardons for January 6th, particularly those granted the most egregious, unrepentant actors who assaulted law enforcement officers doing the job they swore to do. Now, comparing January 6 rioters and so-called Antifa anarchists is a false equivalency, which presents the bogus argument that somehow two wrongs make a right. And there's still zero proof that the 2020 election was stolen, and yet the sitting president and his apostles are now repeating the claim like it's gospel, under the assumption that history is written by the victors. Strap in, fellas, we are in for a ride.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely felt like longer than a week in office, I'll tell you that. Rudy, what issue do you think will put some Republicans in an uncomfortable position as they have the White House, House, and Senate?
Yeah, Greg's right. Certainly it's been a whirlwind couple of days. Now, initially, two big issues for me popped up: continuing the war in Ukraine if Russia refuses to come to the negotiating table, and Trump indicating that he wants to expand H-1B visas for people with specific job skills. Both triggered somewhat of an internal debate within the GOP, and as we have seen right here in Texas, a lot of Republicans, they certainly love a civil war and lately have attacked each other, violating Reagan's 11th commandment without blinking an eye. But clearly, I think the Democrats are the ones who are really feeling uncomfortable right now, which is why turnabout is my word, as in turnabout is fair play. I hear what Greg says, but listen, Democrats are having a conniption fit over the possibility that the tactics that they used the past 8 years are about to be used on them. So, it's no surprise some Democrats last week voted for the Lincoln-Riley Act after originally doing a total blue team rejection of that bill. But there are still Democrats who only want to talk about things like the J6 pardons while ignoring the mass pardons that their guy, President Biden, poured out in his last days in office for his friends and family. Twisting and turning, keeping things combustible in Congress, Stephen.
Yeah, we definitely are seeing uncharted territory on both sides, right? Some are upset with the pardons that then President Biden issued, and some are upset with the ones from President Trump. Greg, this topic of birthright citizenship is likely going to be on a fast track to the Supreme Court. Is this all for show, or is Trump actually serious that there are holes in the 14th Amendment?
No question that the president and company intend to test the limits of existing law on this issue. And while most legal scholars believe the executive order is a clear violation of the 14th Amendment, the current very conservative Supreme Court could produce a much different interpretation of the 14th Amendment. And while the president's order is not retroactive, it could serve to undermine the enormous progress Republicans have made with Latino voters if Democrats can somehow successfully frame it as overtly racist, an argument progressives blundered badly with immigration. Bottom line, stay tuned. I have no idea how this is going to turn out.
Rudy, your take.
The strategy from the Trump camp clearly is not about abolishing the 14th, but triggering, like Greg said, a court fight over its interpretation. Congressman Gill is correct in saying the amendment came out of Reconstruction and was primarily done to protect former slaves. The modern interpretation and application of the amendment, however, resulted in things like border birthing clinics, where undocumented migrants now coming into the country to have babies in order to stay in the country. Now the blue states, they filed this lawsuit, and we're going to have to see where this all heads. It's going to probably, stand in a federal court, like here in Austin, then get appealed and maybe get reversed. And then, like Greg says, it's heading to the Supreme Court. And we're already seeing some legislation being filed in Congress right now to push out some type of legislation to clarify who can claim birthrights, Stephen.
All right, that's all the time we have to see this episode or any of our past ones. Go to our station's YouTube channels.
Keep the conversation going on social media.
We'll be back next week as state lawmakers start working on Governor Greg Abbott's emergency items. And don't forget, let us know what you think the issue is.